Yeah, we're going to talk today about event planning and how to think about events and make decisions about events. It's not really about like the nitty gritty of like planning an event, although of course, like we can definitely talk about that, but it's sort of evaluating events in general, and designing events that actually advance your goals. So we're going to help you make some decisions and not just dream. And it's about real fundraising outcomes ultimately, which is more than just revenue. It's also relationship building and visibility. So my question for you all is, what event ideas are you considering? So if you want to introduce yourself in the chat and just hop in, like what kind of thing are you thinking about doing right now that brought you to this workshop? Because I'm curious, and then maybe we can tailor things a little bit more. And sorry for this stripe of sunshine that's right across my face, but I do not control the sun. Okay. So, just to introduce myself very briefly, I've been working in the nonprofit sector for about 20 years. I've been a program admin, a grant officer, a founder and executive director, and now I run a small fundraising consulting business that works with small and mid-sized nonprofits. Hi, Maddie. Hi, Crystal. Thank you for introducing yourselves. Um, and I was a Carter Fellow for the Rhode Island Foundation. I have a background in policy communications, fundraising, and strategic planning. And I've applied for, raised, and overseen at this point over $10 million in individual, public, and private funding. But I have definitely done some events in my time. It's actually one of my favorite things to do. I think they're super fun. And I'm excited to share more about that with you guys. So, I think I went back instead of forward. Yeah. So why are we here? Events are obviously, an important part of running a nonprofit, and they can raise money, they can build relationship, they can increase visibility, they can help strengthen your community. And so there's a lot of different things that happen when we come together and we join with our supporters and the general public to, share about what we do and also to try to raise resources. But one of my common themes that I like to tell my clients and tell folks when I'm doing these types of presentations is there's all different kinds of resources, and it's important to remember that there's a lot of different types, and we want to keep all of those different types of resources in mind when we're making decisions. So there's a myth. This is why I called this Beyond the Gala. Hold on a second. I need to deal with the sunshine. Um, So a lot of people think if you have a really big event, you're going to make a lot of money, because you're going to have, 400 people there and they're all going to buy tables and it's going to be a whole big thing. And visibility always leads to donations. A lot of people choose to do big events because they've always done a big event and that's just what they're used to. I am curious if anyone here is thinking about doing a big event, and we're interested in a gala type of thing, or if you have experience doing that type of event. The reality is, and what I tell newer nonprofits and even mid-sized nonprofits is that if it's a new event, if it's not something that people are really familiar with, then they often don't generate net revenue, not gross. So you can raise $20,000, but if your event cost you $19,000, then you actually only raised $1,000. So, and oftentimes events can be really expensive, and people tend to not factor in staff time and the cost of staff time when they think about the cost of larger events. And staff is really your most expensive resource. And when they're doing things like this, they're not running programs. And so that can be really challenging. And not every organization has a development team to do that type of thing. So not every organization needs a big annual event. And frankly, recent sector trends have shown that certain event types are consistently outperforming others in terms of return on investment, especially peer-to-peer formats, which we know a lot about through stuff that happens with the Alliance for Nonprofit Impact, like 401 Gives, or just other types of peer-based fundraising. So we're going to talk about that, and what that looks like in the context of events as well. So what do fundraising events actually do? What can they accomplish? They can obviously generate revenue. You're building relationships with your donors, which is very important. You're getting that community visibility and connection. So if you do a big event, then maybe it gets covered by the news, or maybe it's out in the world. And you're getting an article, or the press is coming, or people are seeing your advertisement. So that's obviously a real benefit. And then you get more volunteer engagement and mobilization. A lot of times people want to contribute to an organization, but there aren't things that are as easy necessarily to do, where events can be something where it's really easy to put someone behind a registration table, or have them, helping to set up or clean up and things like that. So all of those are really valuable and really important things. And ultimately, though, a strong event is going to prioritize one primary purpose. So you can meet multiple goals with an event, but you want to focus on one and really identify what the most important thing is for your organization, what you're really trying to do. I ran an event that was supposed to be sort of a big party situation because I wanted my volunteers to get to see each other and hang out and socialize and build community within, my volunteer base. And most of the people who ended up showing up were my friends that were not affiliated with the organization. And so that mission didn't end up actually coming to fruition, because the event that I threw was not the kind of thing that my volunteers actually were that interested in participating in. So you can see how you really want to be super focused and think about what is the right thing to meet your purpose. So this is a decision framework that I really like, that is from a resource called Gather, the Art and Science of Effective Convening, which I have a link to it a little bit later that I'll share. This was put out by the Rockefeller Foundation, and it's about conferences more than it is about fundraising events, but I think it's still a really good way of thinking and organizing your thoughts about what kind of an event you actually want to do. So um, first of all, what's the point? Like we just said, your North Star purpose, and how do you want to maybe bring other folks into the design of that event? Do you want your community to have a say in like what that type of event looks like? Um, you want to know who your team is and what kind of resources you have in terms of being able to plan, implement, and follow up with an event. So, do you have the staff for that? Do you have the volunteers for that? Does your executive director have time? Does your board have time to be putting that effort in? And then you really want to be able to form teams around that, right? Because an event is a project just like any other project that your organization is doing. So, you want to know who's responsible for what and how that's actually going to get implemented. You want to know who your target audience is. Are you trying to reach major donors, or are you trying to reach volunteers, or are you trying to reach community members, or are you trying to reach all of those folks? Like really identify who you're looking to engage, because that's going to determine the structure and the type of event that you want to have. And maybe, like I had said, volunteers weren't that excited about going to a dance party, even though I was. But I did a film screening a couple of months later, and it was a relevant movie for the topic and the work that we were doing. And it was super successful. And we had a lot of our regular volunteers come, because that was something that was a little bit more their speed. So it's really important to know your audience. And, if you have major donors that you want to be there, what kind of events are they interested in going to? So structuring the work again is a little bit more about conferences and meetings, but I do think it's still helpful to understand like what type of an experience you want people to have while they're there, and how are they going to feel like they're meaningfully contributing to your organization, and are they going to be learning something at the event? Are they going to be sharing about what they do at the event? What is the purpose of having those people physically there that cannot be accomplished in another way? And I think that people get really excited when they know that there's a good reason for them to be in the room, and that's about storytelling, and that's about sharing who they are and why they're meaningful for the work that you're doing. And then don't ever forget that there's follow through and there's planning to be done at the other side of the event, where you need to be thanking people and you need to be following up with next steps and action items and making sure that you're not thinking, okay, we're going to get through cleanup and then it's all over, because there's always a lot more work to do even beyond the event itself. There's thanking sponsors, there's delivering raffle prizes. So really just remembering that that's going to be part of the resources that you're expending as well. Um, and honestly, like, not every organization needs to be doing an event right now. You might go through this process and realize maybe this isn't actually for us, or maybe there's a higher return on investment priority. Um, and that would help you meet your goals a little bit better. So this is a quote from another guide to gathering that I really like, from a woman named Priya Parker. And she says, going with the flow and catering to everyone makes for a fine event, but narrowing your gathering to a specific and unique purpose creates an opportunity to thrill. When you're planning your next gathering for someone, think beyond the category. Let the following questions guide you in identifying its purpose. So, can I get like a quick, um, I don't know if people are just like kind of off camera, just listening, but I would love to hear from folks. Like, if you are currently clear on who your audience is or what your goals are, what capacity you have, like what types of events you're thinking of. If anybody wants to come off of mute, be super interested to hear where folks are at about that, or if you've been thinking about these questions.
I can go. So, um, we typically do like an annual conference. Well, excuse me, we just did our first annual conference, so we'd like to do another one, which is great. But we were thinking about like what else can we do aside from a conference, considering the lack of funding and such. So we were thinking about scaling it down to do like maybe 4 forums in 4 parts of the state. Because we really right now do not have the capacity to do a big Crown Plaza conference event. And then somebody else was like, why don't we do a gala to like raise money? But I just don't think that we're there yet. You got to kind of crawl to walk, if you know what I'm saying.
I do. So I'm curious, using this framework, what does the conference usually accomplish for your organization? And would the forums do the same thing? So
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like if you're doing a meeting, like, who's your audience and what's the primary purpose? Is it education? Is it gathering?
Um, it's for the Rhode Island Coalition for Elder Justice. So it's about capacity building and making sure we're providing education, and also like on a global level, what are other states doing that we could kind of adopt in terms of preserving older adults' rights and such.
And so the idea of a forum, I think, makes a lot of sense, because you can get that input and you can provide that education in a smaller setting. And a lot of times you can get that space donated. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to get space donated for a 400-person event. But if you're doing a 30-person event, then you can meet in a library or you can meet in
Mm-hmm.
a community center. So yeah, that's a really wise appraisal of where things are at. And what do you think that a gala would do the same thing?
The gala would be, in my understanding, more of like a celebration. Although there
Mhm.
could be some training opportunities, I guess, in the gala, but we're such a small nonprofit and we're just starting. We're not at the gala capacity just yet. And I think somebody just pointed it out because, they're always going to galas and that's like popular. Like towards the end of the year last year, there's so many different galas. But those were like well known organizations. They
Yeah.
earned their right, if you will. I don't think we're gala ready yet to like have a party and celebrate yet. We need things
Yeah.
to celebrate.
Well, and there might be other ways to celebrate that feel more achievable. So you don't necessarily have to only celebrate in a gala, right? You can have different kinds of
Maybe a
parties.
coffee hour or a cocktail
Totally.
hour, something simple. You're right. I didn't think of that. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of what this is about, right? It's to see, like, okay, well, what are we really trying to accomplish? And what are all the ways that we could think of to get that done, that are really going to get you the outcome that you want with the
Mm-hmm.
resources that you actually have.
Yeah.
Great. Anybody else want to share anything about where they're at or what they're thinking of doing? Okay, I'll keep going then. So this is what we were just talking about, purpose before format, right? So I think this really gets at what you were saying, Robin, which is a gala, a walk, a party. It's a category of thing. It's not a strategy. So the question to ask is if this event works perfectly, if everything goes off exactly the way you want it to, what changes for your organization? Will people be more educated about what you do? Will people be motivated to sign up to volunteer? Will people give $5,000 gifts and above, right? The strategy is is related to an outcome that you want to see. And I think that parties are great. Everyone loves a party, but that answer to that question, what is going to be different for your organization after this event, should drive every decision about how you design that event and what it's going to look like. So these are some event types that just in terms of research right now and evidence that are consistently performing well for small and mid-sized nonprofits. So this is that broader list, right? Sort of beyond the gala, what are the types of things that you could be looking at? So peer-to-peer fundraising has been growing consistently and has been very effective and is something that is getting more and more prevalent and common. And that includes all kinds of stuff. So those are runs and walks. Those are challenges. Those continue to grow and have showed a lot of resilience post-pandemic. When you think about it, what this really relies on is personal relationships and word of mouth. And what you're doing in that scenario is you're actually mobilizing your existing supporters to fundraise on your behalf. And there's lots of ways to do that. It doesn't just have to be a run or a walk. But when you're considering how to bring people in who are already supporters, instead of just asking them for money, figuring out how to support them so they feel comfortable and know how to ask their networks for money on your behalf is really a super efficient win-win scenario. But what you have to make sure you're doing is giving them the tools that they need and the systems and the structures. But once you set that up, it's something that can be a little bit more plug and play moving forward. Mission-driven experiences are very popular. So if you want to bring people out for site tours, if you have programming that is compelling, interesting to watch, I ran an organization that did farm-based food recovery. So we were out gleaning food from fields and bringing it to hunger relief agencies. It was very photogenic, and it was a really nice thing to be able to invite people to come out and do themselves. So we had state agencies come for team building, but we had, our state reps, our federal representatives. Folks really liked being able to come out and be somewhere that wasn't an office and kind of see the thing in action. So that can actually be more compelling in a lot of ways than, a gala or a party that's a little bit removed from the work itself. But also remembering that if you are going to be doing any kind of a gala or party, you want to make sure you're bringing the work into that. And people will do like table cards or slideshows or invite participants. And that type of thing is always really important. I love this idea of salons and small dinners. So if you have like a large donor, one thing that you could do is invite them to contribute a dinner at their house, and they can invite other friends of theirs who think that your organization might be worth supporting as well. And it gives you an opportunity to really form actual relationships with folks and talk to individuals, because at a big party, like, no one gets to talk to anybody for very long. You're doing kind of, you're schmoozing, you're walking around, you're saying hi, but it's nice to really get to dig deeper with folks. And then a lot of times, whoever's invited from the organization can do a small presentation, explain about the work, explain about the needs, and then there's usually a clear ask at the end of something like that. Sponsor-centric events are also great, where you're less focused on getting ticket sales from participants and more income is coming in from actually the exposure to your volunteer base or your the people you provide services to. And that is a benefit to companies and and businesses that are interested in getting the word out about their business more. So that would be your main source of revenue, where you'd get sponsors at 500, 2,000, $10,000, depending on the size and scale of the event. And then you're not worrying so much about getting a lot of small donations. And I think that can be really helpful. And obviously, in any event, you're going to be asking businesses to donate to what you're doing to bring the costs down. And you always are thanking those sponsors. But I think it's important to remember what important source of revenue that can be. And then community centric local events, again, like walks or fairs or, you know, doing something that you know is connected and tied to the community that meets a need. And that is really focused on what you know about your constituents. And that creates more connection and more support. So, again, this strategy is leveraging supporters and their networks, and it's expanding the reach beyond your organization. And so a lot of those goals that we talked about earlier can actually be met through these events and doesn't happen actually even as well in a larger gala or party like that. Um, any questions or thoughts about any of these? Does anyone have experience running any of these types of events that have been particularly successful for you? Or are you considering doing an event like this? Feel free to put it in the chat too as you're listening and thinking about some of this stuff. Um, so small can be really strategic. Smaller events can have a much higher return on investment than a big gala. So again, lower overhead, obviously they cost a lot less to run. You're getting much more authentic donor engagement because you get that one-on-one time when there's the opportunity for that. It's often easier and better quality follow-up because there's always going to be some follow-up after an event. And if you had 20 people come to an event, you can meaningfully follow up with 20 people. If you had 200 people come to an event, it's a lot harder to meaningfully follow up with them. And these can just produce a higher long-term return on investment. So let's say you form a relationship with a donor at a dinner at someone else's house, and they end up being an annual $10,000 a year donor. That can be something that has a much larger payoff than putting all that time and effort into doing a larger event. And then it saves your staff time, it saves your organization time. You can focus more on running your programs. And I think that's ultimately what you're there to do. So that can be really supportive. So just keeping in mind, bigger is not always better. And again, we know people run these galas, folks are used to them. They're great if they, again, are established and people know about them and they're used to going and there's a lot of consistency there. But if you're trying to do that from scratch, you might want to start with some smaller events first, like this. Some other examples, walkathons, virtual challenges, birthdays, personal goals for peer-based fundraising. If people want to do a special fundraiser for their own birthday on social media and tag your organization, say like, this is what I'm really hoping people will support on this day. Again, walking people through your program. And this is something where you might have 10 people walking through on any given day, or you might have 2 people walking through on any given day. But again, that gives you more of that relationship building. And any type of volunteer-led experience is going to save you time and energy. So if you create templates and tools for volunteers to be able to run their own gatherings and events and feel empowered and confident to be enrolling people in what you do, that can be a real time saver for your organization. Restaurant nights are great. Like if you have a restaurant, a local business that's very excited about what you do, they can contribute very meaningfully. My organization was a beneficiary of the Newport Restaurant Group's gift card promotion at the end of the year. They would have a percentage. Uh-oh, sorry guys. I think I hit the button. Um, So if you have a restaurant that really loves your work, they can sometimes donate or they can give a percentage of their sales. Flatbread Pizza does this as well. They're very well known for doing that. Or joining up with another organization that does a similar type of thing for you as you and having some sort of a themed collaborative thing where you're pooling resources can also be really helpful. Um, So just to be clear, what makes an event a fundraiser? These are things that must be present for this to actually be considered a fundraiser. So you definitely want to make sure that this is happening. You have a clear ask. So there's a pathway for folks to contribute in some way. It doesn't have to be money. Again, if your goal is to get people to sign up to be volunteers, you just want to make sure that you have all the materials that they need there to actually do that sign up or give. And you want to reduce friction. This is something that we all know well from, online shopping and Amazon and places that just make it as easy as possible to separate you from your money. So that's something that you want to be able to do with folks at your events as well, is just make sure that there's QR codes set up for donations, that there's credit card machines, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. You want to make sure it's like super easy and people know what it is you're asking for. So you might be having an event where you're doing an education component or you're doing a program walkthrough and you think, okay, we're educating folks. That's what we're here for. But every time you interact with the public, whether it's a newsletter or an event or anything like that, there should always be some sort of an ask at the end because you've enrolled people and you want them to take another step, and that's what's keeping them engaged. You want to make sure you have an audience that's actually aligned with your mission. One of the challenging things about throwing a big event is that you're also throwing kind of a wide net. And you might end up with people at your event who don't necessarily know what it is you're doing, aren't necessarily aligned. Maybe they just came for the ice cream or they came for the puppies or whatever happens to be happening. But you want to really try to target your events and your audience to make sure that they're folks who are really going to stay engaged and committed over the long term. And then you want to have a follow-up plan after the event. So sending follow-up emails, maybe follow-up calls, maybe invitations for coffee or lunch, especially if it's something larger and you didn't get a chance to really connect with somebody. It's a nice opportunity to be able to say, hey, I saw you at the thing. We didn't get to talk, but I'd love to connect more and meet one-on-one and really build that relationship. But if there isn't any follow-up, then it's really not a fundraiser. If you didn't ask folks for something, if you didn't make a plan to keep them as part of your organization and as an advocate for what you're doing, then it's not really meeting that criteria. Some reasons not to do an event or not doing it yet. So, if these things are true, you might want to just take a pause and think about whether it's really the right time or if it's the right event. So, if you don't know who's going to come, like if you're not super clear on who your audience is, then might not be the best time because it might mean that your purpose or your goal is not super well defined. If you don't have staff or volunteer capacity, if this is going to take your staff away from their core work and they will be, super overwhelmed and not able to actually administer programs or meet their other responsibilities, I would hesitate to move forward with an event. A lot of people will hire a consultant or someone external to actually run the event for them because they don't have the internal capacity. And at a time like this, where everyone's a little bit strapped for resources, you really want to be sure that you're not asking too much of folks, especially, if it's going to lead to burnout, because events can be really stressful and they can be a little chaotic. It's outside your usual routine. It's outside of people's skill sets. Not everybody's good at doing all of the things, making centerpieces or whatever. So that kind of thing can be really challenging. If your board isn't engaged and able to really step up and support the event and invite all of their friends and make sure they're also contributing in whatever way they can, whether it's, time, contact, energy, then you might not be well positioned because board engagement is really, really important. If you don't have a follow-up plan, if you're not sure how, like what you want to do afterwards or how you're going to keep people engaged, or if you're not, you're like, well, people will just come and then they'll be happy and they'll like what we do. You really, again, want to make sure that you know how you're going to make the most of this. Or if it's a default choice, if it's something like, hey, we've just always done this, so we're just going to keep doing it. I think it's always really good to go back to the drawing board and review and take a look and see, is this something that still makes sense for us? Do we still have the resources? Are people getting bored? Do we need to reconfigure the event? Do we want to think about doing something a little bit different this year that gets people more excited and engaged? Those are all just good questions to ask rather than just kind of assuming that this is the thing that's going to really meet your needs the best. Um, And again, so other alternatives to events, like we've talked about alternative events and different types of events that you can do. But if an event isn't the right move, if even doing a walk or something like that, there are other ways that you can still build those relationships and make sure that you're raising funds, peer-to-peer digital campaigns, again, like 401 Gives, but there's lots of different examples of that kind of thing. Targeted donor conversations. So let's say your executive director was going to spend 200 hours on event setup and planning and all of that. Is that 200 1 hour meetings that they could have with large donors? And would that go further in terms of being able to cultivate those donors? Or is it 200 half-hour meetings or 100 2 hour meetings? Just think about the resources really and evaluate that, because just because you can't do an event doesn't mean you can't still get those priorities and the purpose and the goal accomplished. And again, those small cultivation gatherings, I think, really go a long way and are a really exciting way to have, you can do cocktail parties, you can do garden parties, you can do a crafting event, you can do all kinds of things that are going to allow you to have those more one-on-one connections. And all of this is just to say that events are optional. You don't have to do an event, but you must always be cultivating relationships with your donors and with your volunteers and with your constituents. And if an event is the right way to do that, awesome. If it isn't, you still want to be figuring out ways to keep people engaged. So we're not that talky today in this group, but I was thinking it would be fun to do a quick design exercise for your own purposes, your own events, to define your primary goal, your target audience, and then maybe one next step that you want to take within the next 30 days. And I'm sure everybody here is familiar with the idea of SMART goals, which is specific, oh, geez, achievable, realistic, and time bound. I can't remember what the M stands for right now. But you can obviously do this on your own. Yes, thank you. Measurable, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. So if anybody already kind of has this, or you've been taking notes, or you've been kind of ruminating and thinking about this while we've been talking, I'd love to hear from you. You can put something in the chat or feel free to share out. But otherwise, this is something you want to do on your own and just take a look at and see, really get clear on these so that you know what you're looking for. Anybody on the call want to step in? Maddie, Megan, Raj, and Crystal. I think we lost Robin. All right, we'll keep moving. So tips for better outcomes if you are doing an event, building strong storytelling into every touch point. So if you're registering folks, if you've got them at the event itself, if you're doing follow-up, making sure you're really telling a compelling story about what the event is for, what the outcome is going to be, who's going to benefit from it, making sure that you have a really, really clear and well-crafted message to everyone who's engaging. We talked a little bit about sponsor partnerships, but reducing risk through sponsor partnerships is great. So if sponsors are contributing to your event, then that brings down the concerns about ticket sales. You don't necessarily have to worry that you're not going to get enough folks to cover certain costs, because the sponsors are going to be covering those costs for you or donating those items or what have you. you really do want to track your return on investment realistically. Again, that idea of not counting staff time towards the cost of the event, I think is the biggest example of where people kind of go awry. And this is a very classic thing that happens in nonprofits, in small businesses where we don't value our own time, but you're not really calculating the true cost and the true net benefit if you're not incorporating that staff time into your calculations. And then again, make sure you're following up within 48 hours. And this is for any type of fundraising. If people are contributing, if people showed up, you really want to, as soon as possible, say, thank you. We're so grateful. We really appreciate what you've offered. We had such a great time. Here are some photos, whatever the takeaway is, and then just make sure that you're doing that stewardship. Finally, I just want to share a couple resources that I've mentioned a little bit throughout. So Priya Parker is a woman who wrote this book, The Art of Gathering, How We Meet and Why It Matters. And she is a big proponent of doing things that are just a little bit more innovative and exciting and interesting. And she has a lot about asking people questions at events and sort of designing the things so that people are surprised and delighted, and how are ways that we can just step outside the usual, like we're sitting, we're having dinner, we're listening to speeches, like which I think is a nice thing to do, especially as different generations enter into nonprofit and giving spaces. I think they're looking for experiences and connection just as much as they're looking for the ability to give back. And then this resource, Gather, The Art and Science of Effective Convening, is from the Rockefeller Foundation. Again, it's more for conferences and meetings, but it is fantastic. There is a newer version of this that I do not like as much. And this one I think is more comprehensive and better. And it's really hard to find on the internet now. So I'm going to share a link in the chat with you all. And I think Robin can possibly share it out when she sends any follow-up materials, or there we go. So this is literally just my Google Drive, but it's available for viewing. Anybody who has the link should be able to take a look at it, and then you can download it, make a copy for yourself. It is not proprietary, whereas Priya Parker's book is proprietary, but she also has a free resource on her website that I think is really great and worth taking a look at. So just, if you have a one sentence takeaway or what you think your next action is going to be after this information, and just remember, fundraising works best when it's intentional. So you know exactly what it is you're doing and you know why you're doing it. When it's relational and it's really focused on connection with other folks and with your supporters and champions, and when it's aligned with what you're trying to accomplish and what it is that you do. So those are really your core takeaways, and you just want to reinforce that deciding wisely on what you choose to do is a funding strategy. That's an important part of any efforts that you're gonna take on. Does anybody want to do a little one sentence takeaway or any action that you're interested in taking after this event? I'm doing my best to give folks time to respond, even though we haven't had a lot of responses, but you can always put it in the chat too. So any questions or anything anyone wants to share about, again, events that you've thrown, things you're thinking about doing? I definitely was hoping this could be a little bit interactive and we could learn from each other a little bit as well. So happy to open the floor if folks have thoughts or ideas about anything that we covered.
I'm going to use this time to ask a question for the Alliance. Um, and earlier in the presentation, you talked about how like large fundraising events take development staff, volunteer time, and a lot of like organizational effort for folks who don't typically do that work. But you also brought up the toolkit for figuring out conferences. And since the Alliance is planning a conference, do you envision that strain also being kind of the same? Or because conferences aren't like fundraising events, do you imagine that the roles and responsibilities are a little bit different from like a typical event?
That's a great question. And I think that what is different about a conference is that it's a little bit more content heavy. So there's an expectation that you're going to be presenting about the work that you're doing and you're going to be sharing about the work that you're doing. And it's an opportunity to build networking connections with like people who are doing the same type of work that you are also doing, right? So that to me feels like programmatic work that program staff are doing. Now, when you move into the logistics side of the event itself, and that's food and space and hotels and coordination and name tags. Good Lord, I'm so glad that people seem to have been moved away from the name tag thing because that was always kind of a nightmare. um, those are the pieces of it that will be taking people away from their day-to-day work. Now, I've had roles where supporting events was built into the job description, and that was just part, it was organizations that did a lot of events, and that was an expectation, is that, it's all hands on deck and people are going to join up. And hopefully folks are accounting for that and saying like, this is part of our program mission. But there are people who specialize in those types of logistics and who have those skills and who have a lot of experience around that. And anytime someone specializes in something, what it ultimately means is they're probably going to do it faster for less and more effectively than someone whose job is running a helpline, because running a helpline and throwing a party are not the same skill set, right? Um, so that said, I mean, I think there are people who run helplines who probably love getting a little bit of a break to go set up a registration table or do something a little bit different. It's also kind of keeping in mind who is more social and who likes that sort of people person activity and wants to be engaging in that kind of thing. So a lot of people have strengths that aren't being fully utilized and can be put to work in this type of thing. So I think it just depends. But yeah, it definitely does take staff time no matter what.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Anybody else? I'm so curious what you all are doing. I really want to hear more about your events. Especially these days. I think there's so many opportunities. One of the things I really liked doing during the pandemic was we had a lot of um, farmers that we were working with, and we had like a farmer speaker series on Zoom where folks could hear more about the work that those folks were doing. Or we'd have writers. We had a little discussion group where we read an article that was like relevant to the work, and then folks got together and just kind of chatted about the topic. And I thought it was nice for folks to get kind of a broader perspective on the work that we were doing. um, so there's lots and lots of different ways that you can bring people in, but I really am very curious how all of you are doing that. And if not, we can head out a little bit early, but this is my contact information. I, again, run Full Blown Futures. So we do fundraising strategy and grant writing, project management, that type of thing. So if anyone's interested in reaching out, I do provide some pro bono support for the Alliance, and I'm happy to have smaller one-on-one conversations with folks if they're interested in thinking about this more or strategizing or planning or learning more.